as well. We were a little bit afraid of building blockchain cryptocurrency related systems in the United States and set up in Switzerland for that reason. Had some activity in Canada, but I had a presence in New York for a while and wanted to be in the United States. So we gathered application developers. We started building a few different applications, App Store, accounting system, realized it was very hard to build applications with no developer tools, no infrastructure, no ecosystem, not even a public release of the platform. So as a result, we ended up building a lot of that. We built Truffle developer tools and MetaMask and Infura infrastructure that handles billions of transactions and queries from the ecosystem. We started focusing on product, and we ended up doing consulting over time, fairly early on for companies, for governments, for central banks, and then we developed the need to do education in a systematic way, developed Consensus Academy, and in time, capital markets activities like venture investing and token launching. Sam was there very, very early and was instrumental in building out that first prong, the product prong. So,
but you guys do, I mean, today, right, so you're obviously pointing out that when you guys first got going, it was very small, and Ethereum, which obviously you helped to build, Joe, right? You were kind of small, and now 2018, you guys have 1,000+ people working for you, over 1,000 people, and you basically cover everything. Right, so
not everything, lots of things in our little ecosystem. It's still not a huge ecosystem.
So I think some of that derives from the level of abstraction we operate at. I think a lot of people don't understand that. When I found Joe, and at the very beginning of Consensus, we were really looking at an ecosystem design problem. Right, it was a little bit like it's 1991 and we see Snapchat, we see Facebook, we understand all these application level things like games, financial products, prediction markets, custody solutions, et cetera, but we don't have an Apache web server. We don't have a web browser. We don't even know what that looks like. And so what I set out to do, along with Joe, is structure us at a level of abstraction where we can build a lot of companies at once instead of trying to build a lot of products at once. We felt it was, I don't know any company that set out to build 50 things at once and was successful. We also felt it was too early to make just a fund and start handing out money because none of the rails had been built yet. So being a venture studio allowed us to make companies and just sit right at that level where we can build a whole ecosystem at once. I think we've done that fairly successfully. As Joe said, we've made a lot of the tools that everyone uses to build on Ethereum. We also do consulting. So it seems gigantic that we're over 1,000 people, but it's because we are a collection of other companies doing a lot of different things.
Okay.
And also because the blockchain trustable infrastructure enables you to modularize and granularize functionality, where if we set out to build a single monolithic product, we'd have to build an identity system for it. We might have to build an accounting system for it. These were all standalone things that we needed for our interoperation in our different projects, but they could also be standalone products and standalone companies in time.
Right, so you guys have basically built all the infrastructure, if you like, that anybody else can use to build a decentralized or a blockchain-based app or service.
Yeah, so some of the infrastructure that we've built, like Truffle, which is the most used Ethereum development framework, MetaMask, which is a Chrome plugin that you can use to browse the Web3, and Infura, which is an infrastructure layer. These are massively used in order to build products using Ethereum, and we created them in order to allow the developers in the ecosystem to have as many at-bats as possible to create amazing products that people would want to use.
We created them because we needed them. The guy who was building the App Store was building tools to enable him to build the App Store and decided that building this tool suite, this tool chain, was even more interesting. Our in-house test network infrastructure ended up evolving into Infura, and I think at DevCon 1 began to be offered more publicly.
That's how a lot of our things come about, is just, as Joe said, because we have a lot of the smartest people in the world, I think, working on Ethereum in one place. And if they need something, then they build it. And now Infura, for instance, is 8 to 10 billion API queries a day. Truffle is what everyone uses to build on Ethereum with. MetaMask has about 1 million users. So we have successfully met our own needs and the needs of the market.
So in terms of the number of products, you mentioning that you have over 50 products? Is that
We have
right?
about 50 products.
In different states of maturity. Yeah.
What does that mean?
It means some of them are very young and not released, so 50 different projects.
Okay, and you mentioned internally there's a pipeline that has tens, hundreds, thousands of other ideas that are sort of bouncing around.
It's hard to quantify, but there must be at least hundreds of ideas bouncing around. But we're a decentralized organization in a number of ways, and we try to crowdsource from the community, from within our company, different ideas, and we have a process that we call RAC, a Resource Allocation Circle. It's a little bit like an internal VC group where we take ideas, we evaluate them, we fund them, we resource them, and we sort of pipeline them through a number of processes to get from idea stage to market validation to maturity. And that's how a lot of our ideas come about. So some of them come externally as well, but a lot of them come just from our own needs and through our own ideation prototyping processes.
Yeah, and many of those are core consensus projects. So Amanda might come up with an idea. We might flesh it out in some design thinking sessions and hire people for that. We may have a project come to us that's exciting, and we put it through our process and adopt it. But there are projects that are a little more peripheral to core consensus, projects that our ventures arm invests in. We've got the Tachyon Accelerator kicking off tonight and tomorrow, where we're putting money in an accelerator context into 15 different blockchain projects. We help token launch our own internal projects and a bunch of external projects. So there are lots of different ways that we interact. We security audit many projects and have significant impact in that way.
Right, so there's so many different arms, right? So you've mentioned one of them, investment. So what are the kind of deals that you do? What are the kind of projects that you're seeking out there?
Blockchain projects.
All kinds.
Right. So anything that's basically a blockchain based, right?
Yeah, so things that are cool, things that are relevant to our Ethereum ecosystem, things that may be complementary to the Ethereum ecosystem. So a project around decentralized storage, a project around interledger communication. We spoke with a very interesting project last night that is sort of a if this then that for different blockchain protocols, sort of way of scripting and sequencing activities on different protocols. So we're using that function, investing in the world. We used to think that because we had breadth and depth that our money was best spent internally, but things exploded, as we all know, 12 to 18 months ago, and now it just makes sense for us to pay a lot of attention and support a lot of what's going on outside of consensus.
It's also about market maturity. So, as I was saying, in the very beginning, it didn't seem like a good idea just to make a fund, right? Because everyone would have had to build the same things because there was nothing,
Sure.
right? No one had heard the word blockchain before. It was just us building stuff, and everyone thought we were crazy. When in 2015, when we were walking into boardrooms, everyone said, "What are you even talking about?" Obviously that's a little bit different now. But at that time, if we had just handed millions of dollars to a bunch of different companies, they all would have had to build the same rails.
Right.
Now that the market has matured, there are a bunch of new things that make sense. Handing people money to build on top of the infrastructure that's already there does make sense now, and so that's a business model we employ. Also, we haven't really gotten into all of the structure of consensus. Actually, it's very large, but somewhere along the way, people have asked us to consult for them. Right, governments, Fortune 50, central banks. If you start Googling Ethereum and blockchain, you find us pretty quickly. And so we get asked to build, consult on, deliver solutions around that infrastructure all the time. So we've spun up that as well, and that makes a lot of sense for us too. So that's another large part of how our business is evolving, I think. In the very beginning, we looked like a bunch of kind of crazy crypto anarchists, and as things move forward, we look a little bit more like maybe an Oracle or something, right? Where there's this core technology, and there are a lot of real businesses with real use cases on top of it that need to implement it. You can't buy an Oracle database or an IBM mainframe off a shelf and plug it in. You need someone to design a solution around it and deliver it. And so as we've built all these technologies in our venture studio, as those things mature and become more commonplace, then it makes sense for us to help the world implement it and move over to the rails of blockchain.
And we've also
just to clarify, I think this is important. We don't look like an Oracle. Our protocol engineering team that's building a next generation Oracle-like product, a blockchain, obviously,
Sure.
and our solutions group together.
We're much weirder looking than an Oracle for sure, but I think as it matures, we need that too. So that's why we have so many things going on.
We've also played a pretty big role over the past 2 years, especially in telling the story of blockchain and Ethereum to the world and starting to really cross the chasm to users, explaining what this is, how it works, trying to optimize user experiences so they can actually get into the products. And it's just been amazing seeing how many people know about blockchain and Ethereum and how many people are building on it, and to see how that traces back to some of those efforts.
Yeah, so let's talk about that one a bit. So at the moment, I imagine most people, when they think of Ethereum, they think of investing, right? So maybe if you bought it a year ago, perhaps it was like $200-ish, or the idea is that people that didn't get into Bitcoin early, right? This is a new way they could get in. This is what most people think of, right? So what is the future like? What is it really gonna be like? What are the areas where you can use the blockchain, actually make products that people in the audience are actually going to use?
So Consensus is very focused on the software side and on building blockchain software, as opposed to focusing a ton on price and the cryptocurrency side. So one example of software that we're building, we have a company called Civil that's actually doing their token launch on September 18th. They're building out a whole media ecosystem on the blockchain, which includes decentralized governance, basically not allowing any government or central authority to decide what is truth in media, censorship resistance, permanent archiving, working with the Associated Press actually to ensure that syndication makes sense. Ethereum does a great job of solving the double spend problem online, and they're leveraging that to help the AP and possibly work with some other news wires. So I think media is going to be a really great
Okay, and just
case.
so on media, what could we say TechCrunch, right? What's the pitch to us? What can we get from Civil that we don't already have now?
Yeah, so Civil is actually enabling any person to do their own token launch using the Civil protocol to start their own newsroom. So kickstarting all kinds of different journalism platforms, helping to augment and make local journalism more robust, and also helping to bring across existing media platforms and companies to users so users can remunerate them directly.
Okay, what's the pitch to
it's
my
a
boss? 'Cause I'm
platform
sure he's here, right?
that effectively certifies ethical journalists and journalism, newsrooms that are ethical. It gives people who hold that token agency in determining whether a fact is true, or in flagging whether a fact should be scrutinized, whether a statement should be scrutinized, whether there's plagiarism. It basically gives people a voice that could be used to bump a journalist off a newsroom, or to bump
a journalist off,
or to bump a newsroom off the platform.
Oh, okay. I think you meant
they would lose that ethical journalism.
So someone like TechCrunch that spends a lot of time thinking deeply about what you publish.
Yeah.
That would be something that would hopefully be upvoted and remunerated on that platform.
I think my boss is probably watching this. You could probably pitch him about.
I'm sure you all saw Sheryl Sandberg in Congress yesterday, right? And there's a conversation in our culture right now about who is responsible for mediating and deciding about journalism, and we have a different opinion, or maybe and something to add to the conversation, which is that let's make a decentralized platform that allows people like the head of Columbia's journalism school or other people like that to be part of the conversation, and to decentralize the way that our culture mediates its information.
Okay. And Civil will have a foundation headed by Vivian Schiller of NPR fame that will continue to evolve the Constitution and continue to evolve the platform. So there will be analytics services, lots of different ways of using the token to put new services on the platform.
Okay, and we sort of touched on the price issue, right? Because obviously, as you mentioned, Joe, you know, the sort of the value of Bitcoin and other tokens went up very, very high at the beginning of the year, and obviously now if you're comparing it, it's gone down a
Back to
lot.
school sale.
Right, the back to school sale. So is that, I mean, on the outside, if you bought, you know, crypto, it's not great. But as someone who's building out the ecosystem, are there some good points to that?
Sure,
Price?
Absolutely. So as Amanda indicated, we're a software shop. We focus on building, biddling, we like to spell it.
Sorry?
It's too complicated to get into that.
Biddle, like the opposite of hodl. Hodl was
Okay,
the
exactly.
term from early Bitcoin.
Google
Buildling.
BUIDL or hashtag biddle.
Okay.
And hashtag hodl.
But essentially, we've seen many rises and corrections in price in the blockchain ecosystem since Bitcoin arrived on the scene. And each one of those rises looks epic. Looking back on it, looks like a little pimple in the chart. And each one of those rises gains attention to our ecosystem. It brings in consumer interest. It brings in entrepreneurial, technical talent. It brings in cybersecurity talent. It essentially, this latest wave has created an order of magnitude or more extra activity in our ecosystem in the form of new projects, in the form of talent joining old projects and forming new projects and building new fundamental infrastructure for our ecosystem, and that tends to lag the price rises. But right now, even as price has dropped, there's just much more activity in the ecosystem.
The talent, the quality of it, the amount of energy, the fact that we're in this room right now talking to all you wonderful people. I mean, this is partly due to the price, right? I mean, it's interesting. People follow it, and there's a constant stream of entrepreneurs and talent coming out of big companies and banks to us, and I'm thankful for that.
Okay. Actually,
Can I
on
continue
talent,
answering the question you asked Amanda a while ago about building software? So we recently announced partnering with Rocket Lawyer. Our open law system is a system for decentralized, hybrid blockchain-based legally enforceable agreements. You can actually put an agreement that's part prose and part program on the blockchain right now. If you want it to be transparent, it can be on the blockchain or in decentralized storage. If you want it to be a confidential agreement, you can just hash it up or create a digital digest of it and sign that. So this is open law technology that is a platform in its own right, but is also being used by Rocket Lawyer, which is a platform that's served 35 million customers.
and that helps them to what, like cut down on
So
processes?
it brings them into the blockchain ecosystem. It enables a network infrastructure to run the execution, the implementation and construction of some of those agreements, and it enables an arbitration network and blockchain-based identity to be brought into their ecosystem.
Okay.
It's
I
like
wanna go back-
Mad Libs for legal agreements that automatically executes.
Yep.
And
Maybe.
that's announced today, actually, that partnership. So, you know,
hot off the press.
hot off the press.
I just want to go back to what. So Sam, you mentioned talent, right? That you're seeing a lot of people coming from big companies coming to you guys and other people in the ecosystem. We had a pretty lively panel on stage here yesterday, and one of the theories put forward was that the uncertainty around the SEC not really coming out there and being very, very clear is meaning that countries overseas are taking advantage, and a lot of the tech is being built and developed outside of the US. Do you guys agree with that?
I think the SEC has a very hard job. The entire rest of the world looks to them as the exemplar of how to have a well-functioning securities market. And I think they have offered some clarity. You know, we have spearheaded some of that conversation through our project, the Brooklyn Project, I think fairly successfully, and I'm pretty impressed with what's come of that so far. And we're doing pretty well.
So Michael Arrington had some legitimate frustration, especially a number of months ago. Some of us did feel like we were operating in a climate of uncertainty. But the SEC, in our estimation, has a very good understanding of what's going on in our space. They have given us significant clarity with respect to Bitcoin, with respect to Ether, declaring neither of them securities, both of them decentralized platforms with a consumer utility token. Bill Hinman, Director of Corporate Finance of the SEC, about 10 weeks ago said that about Ether, but even more importantly, he spoke of consumer utility tokens, which can be sort of the business logic, the glue of protocol-based open platforms that enable network business models. Our Ujo music project is a network business model. So these things can bring in a bunch of different people or companies in different roles, and that whole network can deliver product or services to consumers or other businesses. And if you structure the token properly and if you market it properly, so you're not selling it in enormous quantities to speculators, you're not putting up billboards in Times Square and trying to entice people to expect return on investment for the purchase. But if people are actually using the token on the platform and they're sort of restricted to doing that, then that is a clean consumer utility token. It wouldn't be considered a security.
I would also add platforms like my shirt right here, Meridio, tokenized, securitized real estate. I think they've done an excellent job. The regulatory community has done an excellent job of understanding platforms like that, because straight securities that happen to also be blockchain tokens are also a huge market, and we're going to see a huge influx of that. And there are a lot of amazing businesses to be built in that too. So I think their understanding is pretty good.
So you guys think basically it's not true and that there is going to be enough tech?
I think we have a lot more certainty right now than we did a year ago. And I have the New York Bit license did cause a small number of companies to squawk and maybe move out of New York. But I think the blockchain industry in the United States is very vibrant. The Bay Area is exploding right now as technologists and entrepreneurs understand that Web 2.0, as wonderful as it is, has exploited people in different ways, and we're having a rich conversation around that and how blockchain mechanisms, self-sovereign identity can enable us all to build better infrastructure.
And at the same time, it's true that there are jurisdictions all over the world that are embracing blockchain and that are also very enthusiastic about it and open to it.
In a decentralized way.
Great. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time because I'm sure we could have probably gone on for a lot more. But thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. We have a very, very short break. Please be back at 3:50, and we will talk to Kyle Vogt from Cruise. We'll get our AV on, so to speak. So see you in a couple minutes.
When creating a winning app, it all comes down to building great user experiences. No matter what your app does, building mobility services into your app will take the experience to a whole new level, enriching user engagement and increasing customer loyalty. But in today's world, with so many transportation options, delivering a door-to-door solution to your users without leaving your app is a big task. Introducing the Here Mobility SDK, a seamless, fully integrated SDK connecting your app to all transportation services available while remaining within your user experience. The Mobility SDK integrates access to the Here Mobility Marketplace, a global one-stop shop for aggregating mobility services, providing all transports in real time, making it easy for developers and technologists to bring mobility into any app. With the Here Mobility SDK, users will be able to get any transportation service such as taxis, shuttles, buses, trains, bike sharing, you name it. Put mobility into your users' hands. Let them explore, plan, and book their ride without needing to leave your app. Here Mobility, connecting the mobility world.
Carbine is an emergency response platform that gives people the ability to deliver smart and rich data from any kind of devices to call handling systems.
You founded Carbine in 2014. Can you tell us a little bit about what Carbine is and how it functions today?
I founded Carbine in 2014, as you said. The main reason was to help emergency services around the world to get the information they need in case of emergency. All you need to do is to dial 911, 999, depends where you are around the world, or use our different variety of applications. And by tapping one tap, we're immediately delivering all your information, including video streaming, encrypted peer-to-peer, your exact location, all your personal information that you gave us, and some of your medical information. And also we are giving you the ability to chat with the dispatcher in case you cannot speak.
And how did you come up with this idea?
Oh, it's all started in 2013 when I've been robbed in Tel Aviv Beach. When I tried to call the police, the call takers start to ask me, what's your name, where are you, what's happening around you? And I thought to myself, how come that still in the 21st century I need to supply so much information for call takers? And how come that me and you, in these days when we are calling Uber, ordering pizza, they know exactly where we are? And I decided to found Carbine.
What was the technology that you figured out would be able to solve this problem and that underlies the platform of Carbine today?
Currently, we're focusing on we call it time to dispatch. It's the time from the moment person is calling to emergency services up to the moment the call takers are understanding what's happening and sending the service to the field. The first challenge was how can we deliver the information and what kind of information needed to be delivered to the call takers in order to help them understand what's happening. So the first thing is the location. How can we get the location from the devices and stream it into the call-taking system? Second was how can we help the call taker to understand what's happening in the field? So video streaming was the answer, so you can see what's happening in the event. And then we thought about people with disabilities. What's happened if you cannot speak, if you were kidnapped? So we added the chat. This was the first part, but the second part and the most challenging part was all those call-taking systems are legacy. They don't have the ability to show video. They don't have the ability to give you to chat with the person. So we had to build our own call-taking system.
When you're trying to go from legacy systems, municipality by municipality or district by district, how do you really integrate those legacy systems which may vary onto one integrated platform that is Carbine?
So we are not integrating to the current call handling system. We are replacing the call handling systems.
And where have you replaced them to date already?
So we have systems basically all over the world, from Asia to Europe, in Latin America. We also signed our first deal in the United States, and also we have, of course, all over Israel, so it's expanding.
Walk me through how it works.
So basically, with our smart technologies, according to some regulation in specific countries, we are asking you for consent to open your camera location and to share it with the call-taking systems. We have smart technologies that can locate you even in the indoor space within 1 meter accuracy.
How long does it take for you to actually locate me within 1 meter?
It's very fast. It's a matter of seconds.
And what will the future look like if, all the municipalities across the United States and beyond have integrated Carbine?
We are currently focusing on the time to dispatch, how to deliver information from A to B in the most efficient way. But the next phases would be how can you deliver that information to the forces on ground? How can you deliver the information from the person who reported to the hospitals? So the hospitals will get the information from the field and basically will be able to look at the injured person in the field and already prepare the equipment for the person to come. So all this entire ecosystem is very, very huge and very complex around the world, and we have a lot of work to do.
Common Sense Robotics is the first robotics company that was designed with the last mile in mind. We do micro-fulfillment centers, smaller than 10,000 square feet, that do fulfillment for e-commerce and grocery space.
There are a lot of moving parts, literally.
Yes.
Can you tell us a bit about what's happening when you order some eggs, for instance?
Sure.
What are they going to do?
What's going to happen is you're going to order your eggs. We're going to get the order into our micro-fulfillment center, and then the order is immediately going to send tasks to robots. We have multiple types of robots that work in a marvelous dance together in order to get your order picked. So for instance, if your eggs were part of a 60-item order, that would be picked in as little as 10 minutes. And the facility would also be located in the centers of cities so that it can get to you, the end customer, within an hour easily.
Tell me more about the ground robots in particular, because obviously it's quite cute to see them moving around. Are they smart? How do they know where they're supposed to be?
The ground robots are actually kind of stupid, and it's by design. And that's true to all of our robots. So our robots have sensors, they know to drive straight, they know not to hit objects, etc., very basic things. But really, the brain is in what we call the base, which is where we actually have a virtual site and we manage all of the robots, prioritizing all the tasks. So that brain sends the robots tasks and instructions on what to do, go straight, go left, turn right, and they just fill the tasks.
And when they fill a task, they pick up these big blue boxes filled with products. How do you know where the products are and where they're supposed to pick them up?
This is obviously part of the beauty of automation, is that any product that goes into our facility gets scanned and located within a specific tote, and also even within the tote within a specific bin. And our system at any given time knows for every product that came in exactly where it's located, as well as additional information like expiration dates. And it can constantly manage it and move it around to optimize for the movement. So it can think, oh, you're a fast mover, I'm going to put you closer to the touch point so that it takes less time and robot efforts to get to you.
How does it work when you're a new customer? Are you buying robots? Are you buying a service?
Our model is a fulfillment as a service model. Customers would come into an agreement with us, and they would pay us on a per item, per order basis, and we would just fulfill it for them. They'd send us their inventory, they'd send us their order information, and we'd take care of all the rest. We'd take care of the labor, the facility, the robots, the maintenance, everything that's involved to make sure that the customer gets their perfect order.
Why did you originally think about the service approach instead of the technology approach, as you said?
I think it's really to do with where we can bring the most value to the market and how we can expand the market and enable players that otherwise can't.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage TechCrunch editor and Disrupt MC, Jordan Crook.
What's up? How we doing? How we feeling? We're like most of the way through day 2, so one day left of awesomeness, so we can all just soak it up. Quick poll. Who has been in an autonomous vehicle before? Who wants to be? Cool, interesting, good to know. Did you see that? No? Okay, well, it was a bunch of them. Okay, cool. With that, I'm going to welcome our next guest. He's a serial founder, and he is also the CEO of Cruise. Please welcome to the stage Kyle Vogt and your moderator, Kirsten Korosek. Warm welcome.
Hi. So how many people did raise their hands that said they wanted to?
All right, we got some work to do.
Okay, here you go. All right, well, welcome, Kyle. For those who aren't familiar, Kyle is a bit of a serial entrepreneur, CEO and co-founder of Cruise, which GM acquired in 2016. And while you were studying, working on, dreaming about autonomous vehicles, I think since pre-MIT days, maybe, you did take a little break at one point, started a couple of companies, Justin TV, Twitch, then switched back to autonomous vehicles, and I think you were already had started Cruise by the time Amazon had acquired Twitch, right?
That's right, yeah.
So are we all caught up here? Is that
I think
that
so.
about?
I mean, you called it a break to go off and start a company and work on it for 8 years, which was Twitch. But yeah, that's what I call it too.
Okay,
a break.
Yeah,
in the middle of this autonomous vehicle journey.
Well, thanks for coming back. You were here 2 years ago. A lot has changed or a lot has happened, actually, for Cruise since 2016. Out of curiosity, how did you get here today?
I did not take a cruise today.
Okay, so did you take a car, scooter?
I had
did you scoot over
a
here?
whole entourage of people with me. So I had an SUV bring me over here.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. But next year when you come back, will you be in a...
Most of the time I'm using a cruise to get around.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So I do want to talk about the SoftBank investment that just happened, but we're going to get to that in a minute. I do want you to go back in your mind to simpler time, maybe pre-$3 billion flush with capital time, when Cruise actually had started as a different business. You had a totally different business model. You were going to sell an aftermarket product first. And I'm just wondering, at what point in time did you pivot?
Yeah, I mean, so let's go back to there. So
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. When Cruise started, the master plan was that doing self-driving cars is too expensive and too complicated for a startup to do. So we're going to do the simplest thing we possibly can and retrofit existing vehicles with some functionality that gives them additional features or functionality that people would want and be willing to pay for. And so we started building basically a highway autopilot system before autopilot as it exists today was around. And that was our business model. We were going to sell these kits or retrofit existing vehicles and make them really cool, basically make them into self-driving cars with limited capabilities and use the profits from that to actually do driverless cars at scale, which we're doing today. But as we started going down that road, we realized this problem, actually succeeding at this business, is going to be a lot harder than we thought, because we did a survey of potential customers and we found that our hope was that everyone in a certain city, a lot of people are going to have a Honda Civic or a Chevy Cruze or a certain type of vehicle or something, and we'll only have to retrofit a few kinds of vehicles. But it turned out there's like hundreds of different types of vehicles and different makes and models, and actually making the system work on each one of them was going to be really, really hard. And at the same time that was happening, we sort of watched the rideshare companies become huge, and we knew that this sort of critical ingredient to make ride-sharing really successful is sort of the software, and today that software is human drivers. But I think you can make a better and less expensive and more capable version of that software with driverless cars. And so we're like, we're just going to go for it. This is what we signed with to do anyway. And now that there's interest from a market perspective, maybe we can skip step one of this master plan, which is make all the profits from that early business and just go straight forward. And we did.
So were you just sitting around a table and just let's rip the Band-Aid off and make the move? I mean, you had already taken deposits, I think, for the aftermarket product, right?
Yeah, we had to give them all back. But it was basically that. It was sort of hanging out with some friends, other startup founders, and just, I don't know, startup founders are pretty boring to hang out with because all they do is talk about startups. But we were doing that, and we were sort of banging around these ideas, and the concept of just sort of skipping that plan and going for it, we started talking about that, and that latched to my brain. And then within the course of 2 weeks, that kernel of an idea had turned into a very big one, and I started doing all this research and market analysis and trying to figure out how much money it would take. And basically within the span of 2 weeks, completely altered the trajectory of the business, got all the investors on board, all the employees, and went for it. But sometimes, when a kernel like that is planted in your head and it just starts clicking in every single box you're interested in, you can just keep checking. It's like, oh, this makes so much sense. When you have that moment, I feel like you have to go all in.
Was there ever any pushback from investors when you did that?
Yeah, I mean, I made some mistakes in the early days of Cruise. One was doing, what today they call like a party rounds, where there's 50 or 60 investors on the cap table. And the reason for that is complicated, but basically I was skeptical of being able to raise money for this business, and so I pitched 120 plus investors because I thought I was going to need to just take the shotgun approach and get lots and lots of shots out there and hope one works. And half of them invested, so I got lucky. So I had all these investors, and the odds of getting 60 people to agree on anything are close to zero. But eventually got enough of them to sort of agree to this pivot. I didn't really need their agreement, but I got enough of them interested so they wouldn't try to force me out or anything. And the rest of them I pretty much ignored.
Cool. So SoftBank recently invested $2.25 billion, and then GM threw in another $1 billion, for a clean round, very unround number actually. That's a lot of money for a private company that is pre-revenue.
Yeah, it's a lot of money. And as a founder, I'd say who I sort of cut my teeth in the early 2000s and went through 2008 when basically startups were failing left and right, and you're just fighting for every day of capital to fund a startup. I'm completely aware of the fact that this is a lot of money, but on the other hand, when you look at transportation, which is one of the largest markets in the world, even if you do some envelope math, there's 3 trillion passenger miles driven in the U.S. or miles driven, and if you rideshare trips are a couple bucks a mile today. So if you multiply those, the market size is enormous. And so the idea that you could actually invest, $1 billion or $3 billion into a company to have a really good opportunity to win or capture or even take a significant chunk of such a huge market, from that perspective, it's almost obvious.
So you're still targeting 2019 to launch a commercial product, basically an autonomous vehicle ride-hailing product, correct?
Yeah, without drivers. That's the big
Without drivers. So is $3.25 billion enough to get you there?
We'll see. So the thing about this business is, we're dealing with infrastructure. Big, these are robots, but they're cars, and each one might have 30,000 parts in it coming from suppliers all over the world. These are electric cars. They have to be charged and cleaned and maintained. And so just the capital requirements for this business to do it right, to do it safely, and do it at scale are pretty high. And
so it's possible that you could actually go back to SoftBank, GM, or another investor?
I mean, our cash position today is pretty strong. I'm feeling very comfortable with where we're at. And my mindset is basically if there are ways to turn capital into, basically accelerating the path of the company, making it scale faster and all those things, those are the things that we should be investing in with capital. And so when we find those opportunities, whether that's an acquisition or, a way to hire more people or invest in a new technology, we'll do it.
So does SoftBank's money give you more independence in a way from GM?
Yeah, it's a good question because a lot of people look at that deal and think it's a spin out or something, but I don't really view it that way. I think there were 2 key points with this deal besides the money that I think are really important. One is we created a new class of equity, which was just written about, and that's really great because the trajectory of cruise, the value of cruise over time looks pretty good if you were to like plot it on a chart. And all the people who are working at Cruise now actually get shares of Cruise. So as that business does well, even though it's a part of GM, they could participate in the upside that's there. And so that really helps us get talent and more people. But on the independence question, so we have that, but the goal is not to be independent. Like independence is seen as in the startup world as a great thing. You want to be independent from the parent company and do whatever you want. But like the magic of Cruise is actually that we aren't independent, that we have this great partnership. So that when we're working on a car or we find a flaw in the way it does something out on the road or we find a durability issue, we're a phone call away from the guy who designed the part and we can get it fixed and changed same day without going through NDAs and lawyers or trying to figure out who owns the IP and all that kind of stuff that you have if you have like sort of an arm's length agreement with the car maker. So we've done really well with that. Our goal is not to be independent. Our goal is to basically incentivize our employees to do really well and get this product to market as quickly as we can.
So, and previously, employees were offered shares in GM, and so now under the GM Cruise Holdings, it's switched over to being able to have equity in Cruise, which you view as a good recruitment and retention.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. It's that's sort of the magic of startups is when you're able to give people equity in something that has the potential to become very large and grow very quickly. That's exciting reason among many others to join a startup.
So you working pretty closely with GM. I mean, how heavily do you rely on them for their expertise, and like what are you talking to them about? Rely as just manufacturing, or are there other areas where they just have the know-how?
I mean, so I guess there's a number of answers to that question, but like a company like General Motors, a very large company, has vast resources and capabilities, and so it's almost like we've got this room service menu of things we can go find. It's like we need help in real estate department negotiating a lease, we can go find a person to do that in GM, or like we need to figure out how to make this part that's vibrating and squeaking in the car. We need to like have like 5 engineers jump on that who have done this stuff for 100 years and know how to do it, like another thing that GM is really good at is at validating vehicles and making sure that they come out of the assembly line basically with a low defect rate and they're going to last for hundreds of thousands of miles, but also on system safety. And safety is a big topic in this industry, and it should be. And it's nice to have the perspective of people who have basically seen it all and know how to approach these problems. And so there's vast resources inside of GM that we can kind of tap into when we need to. And that's despite the prevalence of Silicon Valley hubris and like this attitude that we can do everything, I think the wiser thing that I've realized, or the thing that I've learned is, you don't want to reinvent everything. You want to focus on inventing the things that are core to your business, and you can do really well and uniquely well, and partner and rely on others who have experts in other domains, and that's what we're doing.
So when you want to bounce an idea off of someone, do you have like Mary Barr on speed dial or Dan?
We talk all the time. We talked 20 minutes ago. Okay. But no, it's great to have, I say leaders I respect and I think are really brilliant at the top. I mean, as you pointed out, I'm a serial entrepreneur, and so I'm here because I want to be, and I think this is the best place for me to be, and the best between the partnership with Cruise and GM, I think we have the highest probability of deploying these cars at scale and achieving all the benefits that will come from that.
So you're testing in San Francisco right now. Mm-hmm. See the Cruise vehicles everywhere. Is San Francisco going to be the first market where you launch your commercial service?
We'll see.
Okay.
There's a lot of factors that go into that.
Okay. If not San Francisco, where would you launch?
Well, so I'll give you sort of a taste of our master plan here, version 2, which is we're going to start by deploying these vehicles in dense urban environments to begin with. And so we're testing in a dense urban environment like San Francisco. And the reason for that is really twofold. One, it accelerates the development of the technology itself. If you want to get better faster, you bring in like the toughest situation to challenge yourself. And the second is these vehicles in the early days are low volume. There's not going to be a million of them on day one, which means they're a little more expensive. And so to have a real business, you've got to deploy them in an environment where there are lots of customers and lots of rideshare users, and also where we can keep these vehicles busy pretty much all day long. Because basically the second you produce them, you're trying to return the capital on that investment, and so we want to keep them carrying. Basically just like an airplane, it's only making money when it's in the air. So these self-driving cars have to be carrying passengers all the time. So we're going to do that in a dense urban environment. It could be San Francisco, it could be another place. Then as we ramp up the volume and add more capabilities, we'll go to less dense environments in suburban areas and then eventually rural. And then scale up the volume, which then drops the cost and means we can operate in more environments and so on until eventually we get every person on the planet in a self-driving car and get them a safer, more affordable, and more environmentally friendly form of transportation.
You mentioned rural. You actually think that there's a market opportunity to go into rural environments?
Yeah, I mean, so we have this sort of simple way of looking at things, which is, depending on where you live and how much you pay for transportation today and how you use it, there's sort of a break-even point in cost and convenience. And when you cross over that threshold, it sort of makes more sense to give up owning a car and use a shared AV. And even if you're in a rural environment, at a certain point, it becomes more cost-effective and more convenient to give up your vehicle. And the magic of AVs in the rideshare industry is that over time, we'll be able to beat that cost down and get it to the point where it is a better choice for you. Because unlike your car, which is sitting idle 90% of the time, our AVs are going to be busy all the time. So that increased utilization means we can drop the cost. And unlike the rideshare 1.0 business today, where you've got humans doing the driving, you're never going to get them to accept a fifth of minimum wage in order to provide this service to rural areas. But with AVs, we will.
Interesting. The area that you described, it sounds like San Francisco would be the perfect environment.
There are lots of dense urban environments.
So let's pretend hypothetically it's going to be San Francisco.
Okay.
Why would you launch in such a complicated environment? You're also testing in Scottsdale, right in the neighborhood next to where Waymo is, which is in a lot of ways a much simpler environment. So why wouldn't you just do something that you can control a little bit better?
Well, I mean, so the thing that drives me and drives the people who join Cruise is the potential impact we can have on the world with this technology. It's, like I said, safer, and it's sort of a secret backdoor to make the air in the cities cleaner by replacing combustion engine vehicles with electric ones that are AVs. And so the sooner we can do that and the more scale we can have, the better we all feel as sort of a company, and then also the economics are better. And so the question that you would ask, I think, is if I have this vision of where I want to be, which is scale and lots of people using this great thing, is the shortest path between where I am today and this future, is it to go test or deploy in an easy city and then try to go from there to the hard city, or is it to go straight for the hard city? And so we've thought a lot about this and decided that while we could sort of plant the flag and launch in a simpler environment, we could pat ourselves on the back for that, but that's not going to get us to our end goal faster. And one of the reasons we've raised all this capital is so we can go beeline straight towards that and achieve the result we want sooner.
Okay. How many employees do you have right now?
I believe around 900, which is terrifying to me because we've grown the company 30 to 40% per quarter for the last 19 quarters, and I now have gray hair.
Can't see it from here.
The red hides it well. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about talent because there's sort of a crazy environment that's going on right now in the world of AVs. There's a pretty limited pool of people who have really deep experience in robotics and AI.
Yeah.
And that's sort of created this environment of poaching and these just crazy, we've talked about this, crazy benefits packages that have been offered to people with that type of experience. But you've told me that Cruise isn't really doing that or not participating in that sort of chasing game. So how are you able to do that?
Well, we certainly compete for talent, but I think you're right in that there's a common theme right now in the industry where there are maybe 100 to 200 engineers who worked on the DARPA Grand Challenges back in 2004, 2005, where it was the first, I would say, serious effort that was made by lots of universities to build self-driving cars. And the idea is, if you want to build a self-driving car today, you have to snatch up as many of these people as you can from that early cohort as possible, and they're going to solve all your problems. What our philosophy is a little contrarian, is that we're going to hire the smartest problem solvers, the best computer scientists, the best programmers, teach them the little bit of additional domain knowledge they need to be successful as an AV engineer, and scale the team that way. And so we have access to a much larger pool of talent than the people that are trying to dogpile on this early group of 100 to 200. And I would say similarly, the other thing we've realized is that's a bit contrarian is, despite the fact that one of the most challenging technical problems we do is writing the software, the brain for these cars that actually navigates these complex urban environments, the way you get to that end result faster is actually by hiring many, many more engineers to build simulation capabilities and tooling and testing frameworks and data infrastructure and all the other systems around those people working on the AV technology to make them go faster.
Interesting. I want to fast forward now 16 years in the future. You're a new dad.
Yes.
And so when your son turns 16, will he have a driver's license?
I don't think so. People today, a lot of millennials don't even want to drive a car. So if that trend continues, combined with the prevalence of self-driving cars, certainly in dense urban environments, and then hopefully many other places, should mean that if you want to drive a car, it's probably because you want to go to a track on the weekend and burn some rubber. But that's a different reason to drive than I think most people do today.
3 really quick lightning round questions, and then we've got to wrap up. You're allowed 1 pass.
Okay.
Okay.
Do I get to hear the questions first?
No.
All right.
We're going to start with a simple coding question. Tabs or spaces?
Spaces.
Okay. Transportation utopia, a world with only autonomous vehicles or a mix of AVs and human drivers?
Definitely only autonomous vehicles.
And are you going to launch in San Francisco or San Francisco?
I guess I get the pass, right? All right.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Kirsten trying to pull a fast one over here on Kyle. All right. Well, we are going to keep things moving because we are just slightly behind on time. So with that, you guys are really familiar with our next speaker, or at the very least his brand. Please welcome to the stage co-founder and co-CEO of Warby Parker, Dave Gilboa, and your moderator, Anthony Ha.
Thanks for joining us, Dave.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, let's put that statement to the test. How many people here, raise your hand if you're wearing Warby Parker glasses right now? All right, we got a few, not an enormous amount. How many people have glasses at home? All right, and it's getting there, but I think you got maybe a couple more sales you can make today.
All right, what we can do.
So Warby Parker obviously has become one of the most recognizable names in online in online retail, and you guys have also led the way to this whole other wave of startups that are building direct-to-consumer brands online. You've also moved offline with more than 70 brick-and-mortar retail stores. So let's talk about how you got here and what's coming next. Many times you've told this story about losing these expensive product glasses. This is sort of like the origin story of Warby Parker, and realizing that it was just kind of crazy expensive and that you felt like you could do something better. And at the time you were in business school, so what was the sort of insight of, oh, not only is this dumb, but how did you actually fix the process?
Yeah, so really started the company to solve our own problems. I had lost a $700 pair of glasses, couldn't figure out why they were so expensive. Realized that a lot of other people were frustrated consumers, and so we started looking into the industry and try to understand what led to a product that's been around for 800 years that still costs 10 to 20 times what it costs to manufacture. Something didn't make sense to us, and as we dug into the industry, realized that there was a massive concentration of power in the space. So there was one company, Luxottica, that owns everything from Ray-Ban, Oakley, Albert Peoples, Persol, Arnett. They own LensCrafters, Pearl Vision, Sunglass Hut, Target Optical, Sears Optical, have over 10,000 stores. They have the exclusive license to manufacture and distribute glasses for most major fashion labels, Chanel, Prada, Dolce & Gabbana, Ralph Lauren, dozens of others. They also own iMed, which is the second largest vision insurance plan in the US. And so they've just done this great job of creating an illusion of choice where you walk into a LensCrafters or Sunglass Hut, see 50 different brands of glasses, don't realize that all those brands are owned by the same company that owns the store that you're standing in, that owns the vision insurance plan you're using to pay for those glasses. And so something didn't add up to us, and the world looked very different. This was about 10 years ago when I lost my glasses. There wasn't kind of a playbook for direct-to-consumer brands. E-commerce was starting to take off in a bunch of categories, but was still kind of unproven. Amazon had not kind of taken over the world yet, and we thought that there was a unique opportunity to create a vertically integrated brand where historically, if you wanted to create a brand of eyewear, you had to sell through Luxottica's channels to have any sort of distribution to get in front of customers. You had to be in LensCrafters or Sunglass Hut. Or if you wanted to be an eyewear retailer, you had to carry their brands to have products that consumers would want to buy. We thought there was a unique opportunity to leverage the power of the internet and e-commerce to produce high-quality eyewear and sell them direct to consumers, cutting out all the licensing fees, all the unnecessary markups, and pass those savings on to consumers, offering a product that normally costs several $100s and offer it for less than $100.
So as you mentioned, part of the goal was to create this vertically integrated brand. But again, at the time, you guys were just 4 guys in business school. How did you actually go about then, just creating this infrastructure for building eyeglasses?
Yeah, so we were 4 full-time students. None of us had ever started a company before. None of us, on paper, we were not the team that you would pick to build an eyewear company or to launch any sort of tech company. None of us were technical. I'd been working in consulting and banking, so I was really good at PowerPoint and Excel. Our first UX user testing, we designed our website in PowerPoint slides and printed out paper slides and would walk into a Starbucks and offer to buy strangers cups of coffee if they would take 5 minutes to help us with some testing. We'd put a stack of paper in front of them and say, imagine this is a home page. Point your finger. Imagine your finger is a mouse. Where would you click? And then they'd point somewhere and we'd shuffle through the pages and put another piece of paper in front of them. And that was kind of our first wireframe UX testing. And so we were really scrappy in the early days. But we also realized that there's only one opportunity to launch a fashion brand, and that people with eyewear, we joke that it's kind of the first wearable technology, but it serves a function in terms of helping people see, so we need trust and credibility on that front. But it's also one of the only products that people wear on their face and has to look good, and so getting both of those elements right, you can't really do in a MVP type manner, and so we felt like we had to have a really polished product from a design standpoint and a polished operational infrastructure to get prescriptions right. And so we spent a year and a half really working on every element of the business before we launched out of our apartments when we were in school.
And so from what I understand, you kind of launched the website, not necessarily doing a ton of promotion, but fairly quickly it started selling more rapidly than you had expected, maybe more rapidly than you could handle. How were people finding the site initially?
Yeah, so we bootstrapped the business. We only spent money on 3 things. So the first was hiring an engineer on Odesk to build our site, because none of us could code. Our initial set of inventory, because we had horrible terms with our suppliers and had to pay them up front before we could get any inventory. And then we hired a fashion PR firm. We realized that for Wharton MBAs is not necessarily the sexy background for the fashion and design world, and we really wanted credibility from a design standpoint. There were a bunch of other sites that were selling glasses online before we were, but some of the biggest sites at the time were $39glasses.com, iBuyDirect.com, FramesDirect.com. They were really focused on price as a differentiator without any focus on design, quality, customer service. We really wanted consumers to get great value but not have to sacrifice anything to get that value. And And so we really wanted a stamp of approval from the fashion community, and we were able to get great features in GQ and Vogue the week we launched. And I think we were just blown away by the power of press and traditional press, being in print in particular. I think still carries a lot of weight and credibility, and being in those publications really put us on the map. We hit our first year sales targets in 3 weeks. We were completely stocked out of inventory. We had a wait list of 20,000 customers, and it was just off to the races. And we didn't spend a penny on marketing or customer acquisition until we were 3 years into the business. It was really all word of mouth and press until that point.
So I want to fast forward a little bit. As I mentioned, you now have like this enormous number of brick and mortar stores, and I think as I think we're both New Yorkers, at least adopted New Yorkers, and you walk around New York, you see all these different like direct-to-consumer brands opening up brick and mortar stores. But I feel like when you guys started doing this, that wasn't an intuitive thing. There were so many other companies that just wanted to be online only. Why did you go in the other direction?
Yeah, our initial thesis was that it'd be more efficient to sell glasses online without the expense of operating bricks and mortar stores. And our e-commerce business is large and continues to grow really quickly, and we're really excited about e-commerce. But we really started opening stores by listening to our customers, and we've always thought of ourselves as a brand first that doesn't really matter how we sell glasses or engage with our consumers, as long as we're providing good service and good product. And I think we surprised a lot of people when we started opening stores where people were saying software is eating the world and bricks and mortar is dead, and every day you read about traditional bricks and mortar retailers that are going bankrupt or shutting down stores. Our view is that physical retail is not dead, but mediocre retail is dead, and it's the companies that haven't adapted, haven't innovated, when in the face of consumers having more choice than ever in terms of what they're buying. And for us, we sell a product that has a service component in terms of adjustments. People want to try on glasses. Even a couple millimeter difference in terms of the design affects how something fits on your face. A lot of people have questions about prescriptions. As we open stores, we also have the opportunity to have eye doctors in those stores or offer services in those stores which are helpful. But we really kind of stumbled into opening our own stores by listening to customers. So we had this wait list of 20,000 customers. We were completely stocked out of our home try-on frames for 9 months, our first 9 months in business, and we started getting calls from people around Philadelphia, where we were based at the time, saying, I read about you in GQ, I really want to try on your glasses, but there's this huge waiting list. Can I come to your store or your office? And we said, well, the store is my apartment, but come on over. I think Philly had the second highest murder rate in the country at the time. And we started inviting strangers in, and people loved the experience. They loved getting to meet the people behind the brand. They loved being able to try on the entire collection. And we found that we learned so much from those interactions that we decided to experiment with some pop-up shops. We bought an old yellow school bus that we gutted and turned into a store that toured the country for about 2 years and went to 20 different cities. And we found that any time that we had a physical presence, we got a really positive reaction from consumers. And we also found that it created a halo effect for our online business. And so we were basically getting the best of both worlds, where we were giving people an experience in stores that they wanted, but also driving awareness and driving more online sales. And then so we said, okay, well, why don't we start to open a couple stores and see what happens? And we've just been blown away by the response that we've gotten from consumers and the economics that we're seeing out of the stores that are driving now a significant portion of our sales. More than half of our sales are coming from our retail stores. They're all tremendously profitable, and so we have plans to really rapidly increase our store count. We have 75 stores now. We'll be at 90 by the end of the year, and soon we'll be in the hundreds of stores in the U.S.
So just to make sure I understood that, all the brick and mortar stores are profitable individually. None of these are just serving as sort of like promotion for the website, right? They have to work on their own.
Absolutely. They're highly profitable on their own, just measuring sales that happen within those four walls. We also don't have a high-pressure sales environment. We built all our own tech infrastructure. It's one tech platform that powers our e-commerce experience and our in-store experience. And so if you're shopping in one of our stores, we have a lot of people that can't decide or they want their husband or wife's opinion. They want to check what their health insurance benefits are. Or they're just in a rush. They don't have their prescription information. And so they don't want to check out in our store. Any of our advisors can take photo of you with their iPad, select the frames that you're looking at. It auto-generates an email, and you can. And then it's kind of one click, add to cart from home. And so we've just tried to make the experience seamless, whether people want to transact in our store or not. But on a standalone basis, the stores are highly profitable on their own.
And one of the other steps you've taken to make the online experience better is you can now do essentially prescriptions from your phone. Can you just talk a little bit how that works?
Yeah, so one of the biggest friction points that our customers have is we'll only make glasses if you have a valid prescription, and prescription regulations vary from state to state. And we have a lot of frustrated consumers that know that they can see perfectly well their existing pair of glasses. They want to update their look, but we can't legally make them a pair of glasses because their prescription has expired. And when we thought about what happens when you actually go in to get an eye exam at a doctor, you walk into a room, you sit in a chair that's a certain distance away from a screen. There are objects that are displayed on that screen. You indicate which ones you can see clearly, which ones you can't. And then a doctor reviews those results and writes a prescription. We said, well, we should be able to bring that experience in the digital world where everyone has a screen at home, everyone has a device in their pocket. So we built an iPhone app where we patented some technology where we can pair your phone with a screen that is in your home or office. We know precisely the distance that your phone is from that screen, so we'll ask you to walk back a certain number of steps until we know that you're about 12 feet away from that screen. We know the calibration of your screen, so we can display objects of a known size there. We have you use your phone as a remote to indicate which objects you can see using various acuity tests, and then we have ophthalmologists that are licensed in your state that can review those results remotely and write you a prescription. And so you can do that from your own home in about 15 minutes and costs $40. And so we're getting really great feedback from our customers on that, and are just really excited about telemedicine in general, about increasing access and making it easier for people to get prescriptions.
So something I'm kind of curious about is, as a tech journalist, we get, I think a lot of the other TechCrunch folks too, get these emails that are always like, oh, we're Warby Parker for X. And I think, even you read headlines, sometimes there's like, just to explain the latest direct-to-consumer brand, they're often Warby Parker for something. How does it feel to you to see, other people sort of adopting the model, and even sometimes like kind of openly aping some of the things you've done?
It's flattering. I think we were, there was no kind of playbook for what we were doing at the time. We were really trying to solve our own problems, and then I think one of the big advantages of being direct-to-consumer, a vertically integrated brand, is that you have access to your end customer. You get so much feedback and so much data that we're able to incorporate that and design new products, new services, new offerings for those consumers. I think when some of the companies that we hear are Warby Parker of X, I think take one element of what we're doing and not kind of the holistic package that I think has led to some of our success to date. And I think a lot of these companies are also going after industries or categories that aren't as big or don't have the same dynamics as eyewear, where it's a massive industry, well over $100 billion globally, where you have this massive concentration of power, really high margins, really unsatisfied customers, and trying to apply kind of similar models to smaller categories or categories where consumers have some pretty decent options already. I think it is a much tougher road. And so, yeah, it's been exciting to see some of these new brands take off. But I think the jury's out around how many of these kind of new brands are going to be viable over the long term.
I mean, do you ever think, oh, well, Warby Parker should also be the Warby Parker for this category and potentially expand into areas beyond eyewear?
Yeah, you know, we have a lot of ideas about other products that we could sell, but we tell our team that strategy is what we say no to. And I think one of the biggest reasons that we've had success to date is our focus. And you know, we try to stay focused within our product category, also within geography. So we're only in U.S. and Canada, even though there's a massive global opportunity, and we will expand into other geographies, other products, other services over time, but want to make sure that we're really treating our existing customers extremely well. One of the metrics that we track most closely is Net Promoter Score, or NPS, is in the high 80s, and that's kind of our indication that we're doing things well, and I think that gives us permission to then think about adding other products and services over time, but want to make sure that we're not kind of getting distracted as business.
So we're almost out of time, but I guess one other thing I wanted to ask about, which is related, is I was surprised to realize, at least from what I've seen from some of the other articles, is that Warby Parker, even though I think of it as so ubiquitous, still has like around or less than 1% market share. When you think about getting bigger than that, do you think it's continuing the strategy you're already down, or do you think something else has to happen to kind of get to the next level?
Yeah, I think that's a benefit of being in a really big category where we're growing really quickly. We have a pretty big business now, but there's still so much opportunity in front of us, and we see massive opportunity within the core business with opening new stores. So this year we'll open about 30 new stores. We see a ton of runway to open additional bricks and mortar stores. E-commerce, we think, is a massive opportunity. So it's still less than 4% of the eyewear category, and we think innovations like Prescription Check, where you can get your prescription remotely, is key to unlocking additional e-commerce sales. We also think that new cameras like the TrueDepth camera and the iPhone 10 that allows us to take 30,000 points on your face and recommend frames that we know are going to fit your face, that we built into our iPhone app. I think these are innovations that are really going to help unlock additional growth, and so we've never been more excited about kind of our growth prospects.
I think that's a good note to end on. Thanks, Dave.
Great. Thank you.
Fun fact, I have Dave's glasses. Those are my Warbies. You guys were like, we were dying to know that. Okay, let's just bring on our next guest. He really needs no introduction. I'm sure everyone here has heard of A16Z, right? Yeah, woo, more excitement. Okay, cool. Well, then let's bring him out. From Andreessen Horowitz, please welcome to the stage Ben Horowitz and your moderator, Matthew Panzarino.
Hello.
Hello, everyone.
All right.
Welcome, Ben. Welcome. We've got a full room for you. It's only like 20% astroturfed.
All right.
All right, let's see. Okay, so when is Andreessen Horowitz going to raise a mega fund?
Well, you know, there's a law that the SEC has about talking about funds that you haven't raised, and like you're not allowed to do that.
Oh, right. Okay. Just checking.
Yeah, no, I've got close friends that did a lot of time in prison, and I'm not answering that question.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Let's place it in a more market-centric viewpoint. So you have SoftBank obviously spending a ton of money. Got Sequoia obviously has raised a very large fund. How do you look at operating in that universe? Does it feel different now than it did a couple years ago, making deals?
I don't think so. I mean, like, you know, we mainly focus on early stage kinds of things, and that's a layer of capital that's a little bit more equivalent to the public markets. So, you know, people writing, you know, if you write a $500 million check, that's essentially an IPO. We used to call that an IPO.
Right.
So, you know, we sell into that, and the more people to sell to, the merrier in that sense. But you know, it's very early in terms of what the impact of those funds is going to be.
Okay. And do you think it'll take a longer time scale than average simply because of the amount of money, or do you think it'll be more rapid because of the amount of money they're putting in?
SoftBank's pretty determined to deploy that money fast. I mean, it's impressive.
Yeah.
Those guys will, they are definitely, they're not shy about writing big checks. So.
Right. Seems to be the mini bet strategy is absolutely the way they're going.
Yeah.
Do you have so the last fund that you folks closed was a bit ago. Do you view that like the current cadre of funds that you have? Are you comfortable there, or does it feel like? Do you feel like you have enough capital to deploy right now for a while?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we've been around, I think, 9 years now, and we've raised over $8 billion. So that's a lot of money. That's plenty to invest. Yeah.
Let's talk about the crypto fund. So the crypto fund, obviously, you know, founded to invest in crypto, in various bets. There is there enough real stuff out there to look at?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, there's probably more developer activity in crypto than in anything that we've seen since the internet. And I think the right way to think about it is it's a new computing platform. So once every decade or two, a new computing platform comes along. So we had the, you know, mainframes and PCs and smartphones. And the thing that's deceptive about it is when the new platform at the time is generally worse in most ways than the old platform, but has some new capabilities. So if you go back to the smartphone, like now, it's like, oh yeah, the smartphone. But then, you know, the people who are used to the PC were like, wow, that is a really small computer that's not too powerful with a teeny tiny screen. How am I going to put my big old spreadsheet on that like little ass computer? And, you know, that was true, but the smartphone also had a camera and a GPS built in, so now you didn't have to just build a spreadsheet, you could build Instagram, you could build Lyft, you could build new kinds of things. Mm-hmm. And with crypto, it's very similar in that it's worse in most ways than the old computing platform in that it's slow, it's really complex, it's lacking a lot of features. But it has one feature that has never existed before, and that's trust. Mm-hmm. And trust is super powerful. It comes from the mathematical and game theoretic properties of the platform, and that means that you don't have to trust the government or Twitter and Facebook or the other people even on the network. You just have to trust math. Mm-hmm. And that opens a very interesting world for developers because you can build new applications like money, which nobody's ever been able to program money before, but now you can. You can program law and contracts, and you don't have to worry about a corrupt lawyer. You don't have to trust a lawyer. You don't have to trust a judge. You can program digital property, so you can build art that only one person owns, and you don't have to trust a broker or somebody who might be faking it. You don't have to trust the platform. If you're a developer, you know, a lot of people built things on the last set of platforms, you know, Twitter and Facebook, and you know that didn't work out that well because when that company changed their mind about what they wanted to be, then all the developers lost. But in crypto world, you don't have to do that. You just trust the math, and that's a really transformational idea. And so, you know, there are just a crazy number of ideas coming out in projects and so forth. So it's one of the things we pay a lot of attention to.
And are you focused a lot on that authentication and ID layer of blockchain, or does the currency aspect of it attract you, or is it a bit of both?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that, so there's kind of store of value, and that Bitcoin is obviously the great kind of leader in store of value. And I think that that's a relatively, it's very valuable, but it's probably less interesting from a technology standpoint than kind of the other side, which are, you know, kind of crypto networks and things like Ethereum, which is the world's computer and so forth. That side is much more competitive. And there are, you know, just a number of things coming out in that arena, naming, storage, lending, all these kinds of things. Where it's, Bitcoin, other than storing your money, there's not that much you're going to do with Bitcoin. It's not really a platform that developers write to today.
Right. And do you think the industry at large is dependent upon the currency to sort of sell that this is a real thing, or do you think it will just fall away as a real matter of concern?
Well, so the currency is kind of fundamental to the layer 1 blockchains in that that's how you reward the miners, and without the miners you don't have security and trust. So you have to have currency. There's no blockchain without cryptocurrency. That doesn't make sense, at least in the public context. So, yes, that's got to succeed, but I think, we're not that worried about it succeeding or not. It's going to bubble up and down, and people are going to be into it and not into it and so forth, but that's how the internet went. That's how these things go. People get very excited, and they get, super scared.
How do you tell, like, a BS company in the crypto space versus something that's real?
Yeah, it's funny. Somebody at the office said the other day, they're like, well, not all ICOs are bad, but all bad companies have an ICO. And I think that's right. It really reminds me of the .com era when, and those of you who are old enough probably remember this, every old, weird, bad company like renamed themselves .com. So you have like Woolworths.com, Sears and Roebuck.com, whatever. And now they're an internet company and their price goes up and everybody goes, oh, that's idiotic. That whole thing is stupid. The internet is stupid. I'm not investing any money in that. And it turned out like the dumb thing wasn't to invest in the scam. The dumb thing was to like give up on the internet because there were some stupid people in it. And so that I think is a big lesson from that era.
I think it's probably applicable to a lot of ICOs in crypto right now.
No doubt, no doubt.
Okay.
Now every entrepreneur is desperate. It's like
right.
Some investor says, "Well, you should do an ICO."
Quick cash, right?
Yeah, quick cash.
Let's talk about the Cultural Leadership Fund.
Yes.
So what's the basic premise? Just have you explain it from the horse's mouth, so to speak.
Yeah. So look, when I got into the industry, there weren't consumer companies in technology. The technology, we made whatever storage or management systems or databases, and we'd sell them to companies or technology companies, wanting to do some productivity thing, or to the government. But then, when the internet came in, and there were some exceptions like Atari or like games, but it's very niche-y. But when the internet came along, and then the smartphone, then you start to get things like Facebook and Lyft and Uber and Instagram and Airbnb and all these consumer products. And and as software is eating the world, then everything going to consumers starts to become a technology company. But consumers are very different than businesses when you think about sales and marketing, in that consumers are moved by culture. And so you really need people who are great at moving culture to be successful in that arena. And, it's one of the things that, and I always look for who's good at what. So, if you're looking for a lawyer, you, of course, hire somebody Jewish. Sorry. It's very racist of me, but I'm Jewish. It's a Jewish joke. But if you look at culture and, like, who can move culture, it's really interesting in that all of the new musical art forms over the last 100 years, from jazz to blues to rock and roll to hip hop, were all basically invented by the same race. So like clearly there's something going on, like somehow in the African American population they understand culture better than anybody else. So we've always had an effort to try and connect that to our efforts because like we want to make money. And so the Cultural Leadership Fund is a way for us to connect to the very top leaders in culture and basically have them invest in companies in our portfolio so that we can create a bridge between tech and culture and basically move both tech and culture forward. And then it's got this nice feature in it where the money that we would normally, in a fund keep for ourselves, we donate back into getting more young African American people into tech so that we continue to win in the consumer arena. So it's something that we're really excited about. It's been great for me. I got to meet so many really, really interesting people in the field, and and we're looking forward to it. It's brand new, so it's got to, in order for it to be high impact, it's got to succeed. But
right. And have you found yourself having to? I mean, obviously there's a whole list of folks involved in it that you're using as probably scouts to a degree, and then also sort of kind of leaders in their various industries. But have you investigated ways to open your funnel to make sure that you're finding the right entrepreneurs that would be perfect for the Culture Fund? Have you had to do any adjustments there?
Well, look, the idea with the Culture Fund is to take the leaders in culture, people like Quincy Jones or Sean Puffy Combs or Kevin Durant, and have them be invested in the best companies that we're invested in. So, these are things, this is normal course of business for us. We find the best entrepreneurs, we connect them with the best cultural leaders. And then, from our entrepreneurs' standpoint, they get exposed to something they wouldn't get exposed to. And from the cultural leaders' standpoint, vice versa. So it's kind of building a network and a bridge between the two worlds. So it's not really a separate effort in that sense.
Okay. I mean, certainly there's been a running thread through various conversations about larger tech companies that if they perhaps had more of investment in culture or been more aware of various cultures outside of the engineering culture that had built them, that they would maybe have not made as many mistakes, or maybe not at least not have made the same.
Yeah, it's 20/20 hindsight too. Though.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, for instance, we'll talk about the Facebook and Twitter hearings yesterday. So they had these large companies that have obviously made some decisions about their platforms. They built them however they're building them, and now sort of the left is pissed that the right has a voice there. That the right is pissed that they don't have as much voice there. Do you think the platforms could have built themselves any better? Could have anticipated this in some way?
Well, it's funny because the whole way, like if you read any of the kind of news on, especially Facebook, Facebook is a joke. It's not really anything. It's, they don't have a competent CEO. Like it is never going to monetize, at the IPO, oh my God, it's a joke. We told you it was a joke. It's not going anywhere. Oh my God, it's taken over the world. It must be stopped immediately, right? Like that was the whole thing with no break in between. And so for them to anticipate that they were going to be like this important this fast, I think is more difficult than people think it would be, kind of thinking of it retrospectively. But they are in a really, I can't imagine being in a tighter squeeze from a political standpoint in that you have, if you're on the left, you hate nothing more than the platform that got Donald Trump elected and the platform that owns his Twitter account, right? Like right. What could you hate more than that? And then kind of due to that pressure, what's happened is both Facebook and Twitter have taken to evaluating the content on their platforms. And because most of their employees are on the left, most of the people they banned are on the right. And so now the Republicans are equally as mad at them as the Democrats. And so like that position, I think that was just like it's a weird circumstance of if Trump hadn't won the election, probably none of this would have happened.
Wouldn't have come to a head, maybe?
But I don't think it would have come to a head. Now, it would have still been the same issues, but they might have had enough time for, eventually AI will be able to, you'll be able to have a policy that's consistently implemented by technology. That's not possible today, when it comes to sentiment.
So you think they will be able to tech their way out of it eventually?
Well, if they, depending what happens,
right.
With these hearings and the government and so forth, but it really is one of these things where I don't think that, I could criticize them and say, well, yes, if they had built their company the right way and this and that and the other, it would have never come to this. And there's a lot of people, there are people who used to work at Facebook saying that. I'm like, you worked at Facebook. Why didn't you say something then? Like, come on, so it's not so easy. It's not as easy as it looks, I guess I would just say. And maybe they could have done something different. But I think it was really hard to anticipate exactly what happened. It was just like I'll give you a short example of this. So one of the thing that really triggered it was the Cambridge Analytica scandal. Well, running up, right, in the old days on Facebook, the big criticism was they were a walled garden. And, they needed to open themselves up so Google could search them and all this stuff, and they were closing the internet. And so they made this API that let everybody access the friend graph.
Right.
Well, that's the thing that they did that let Cambridge Analytica get the data. So, you know, they were really damned if they did, damned if they don't. And so, you know, and that's not to excuse everything, but you can understand how it happened, or at least I can, having watched the whole thing.
The postmortem, anyway, is easy to decipher.
Yeah.
What do you think so here's one, so it leads in. So what do you think the most effective way to increase the diversity of founders being invested in is? Obviously, the Culture Fund is one attempt, but what do you think and this is not just an A16Z specific question, but what do you think the most effective way to find the most diverse founders is?
Well, look, you know, I think you're always looking for great founders, and you know, one of the things, I think a lot of times people think of diversity backwards in that, you know, people go, well, you need to do unconscious bias training. And then you look at the studies on that and you say, well, that doesn't work that well. And you go, well, why? And it's like, well, it's like, don't think of an elephant. You know, don't think of an elephant. Don't think of of course, well, you're going to think of an elephant. And that's what a lot of this anti-bias training lands you. I think to some extent you need more pro-bias training. And everybody's going like, where are you going with this, Ben?
Me
but
too,
what I mean by that is, look, there are groups that get credit, advanced credit, for who they are. Like, if you're Chinese, people assume that you're good at math, even if you suck at math. Like, a lot of people hiring will go, like, I think he's probably good at math. He's Chinese. And so that's like a pro-bias. But it's fine because, you know, there are a lot of people who are Chinese and good at math. So, like, that